Welcome to Empowered by Iron, the podcast for female strength athletes by female strength athletes. We are your hosts, Dr. Kristin Lander from Fiercely Fuel Nutrition Coaching and Dr. Mary Morton, scientist and weightlifter. Together, we are Empowered by Iron. Hello. Welcome to Empowered by Iron. This week, we have a bit of a sensitive subject to talk about.
It's an awesome subject, though.
It's not awesome that it's a thing, but it's awesome because I don't think it's talked about as much as it should be talked about.
It's awesome that we're going to talk about it.
Okay, first and foremost, if you haven't already, go check out our YouTube page. We are now putting up video podcasts, so it's something extra that we're doing for, well, I don't know who it's for, but we're doing it.
For anyone that wants to see our beautiful faces while we talk.
I'll be disappointed. Okay, today we wanted to talk about eating disorders and disordered eating.
Yep.
So a lot of people say that and they think that it means the same thing.
Yeah, they are not the same thing.
They are definitely not the same thing. And I think it's hard for someone who has disordered eating to listen to that and think, oh, if they don't know that they have disordered eating, they think, okay, well, I don't have an eating disorder. I'm okay.
Right. They're like, well, I'm not anorexic. I'm not bulimic. I have these weird things about food, but I'm not anorexic or bulimic, so I don't have an eating disorder.
Right.
But there's something called disordered eating.
Right.
Okay.
So eating disorders are serious and they can be fatal. It's an illness that cause severe disturbances in a person's eating behavior.
Yeah.
Like you said, anorexia, bulimia, exercise-induced bulimia. There's many more that have been, that I don't want to say discovered, but have been named in the last couple.
Binge eating disorder.
Binge eating disorder. There's a lot that have been named in the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. And so, EDs have the highest mortality rate of any mental illness. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
I didn't know that either, which is crazy to me.
I would have thought like depression would be the highest mortality rate with suicide.
And one may be related to the other.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
30 million people in the United States alone suffer from this.
Wow.
So it's not unprevalent.
Right.
And then you have disordered eating, which I know that many of you have heard me say that on the podcast. I say eating disorders or disordered eating.
Yeah.
And I do mean that they're two separate things. I did not have a full-blown eating disorder. I recognize now I just had a severe disordered eating.
Yeah.
Like whatever it was because I was never to the point that I was so small or had such erratic behavior that I needed to go into some type of treatment facility. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it was disrupting my life completely.
Yeah.
100%. Eating disorder or disordered eating is used to describe a range of irregular eating behaviors that may or may not warrant a diagnosis of a specific eating disorder. So it may be something that's diagnosable. It may not.
Okay.
So there are different signs and symptoms. And I know a lot of this affects our female strength athletes.
Oh my gosh.
I was one of them. I've talked to many of you on Instagram about it. So I know this is a big thing. But here's some signs and symptoms.
Yeah, and I think this is super important to talk about because like you're saying, so disordered eating is super common. It's super common among women. It's super common among athletes. You put those two together, female strength athletes, and this is very, very common. I think that I know many people that maybe it's not a continuous struggle with disordered eating, but I think that probably all of us have probably at some point, when I read through this list of these symptoms, I think some of us have all experienced some of this to a degree. And it's when you hear them all together, you think, okay, I need to check myself periodically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what are the signs and symptoms?
So first one is frequent dieting or any anxiety associated with specific foods or skipping meals. Okay. So I would call this a yo-yo diet.
Yeah, absolutely. Or cutting out entire food groups.
Yeah, I remember when I first started all of my nonsense, I started cutting out any carbs, any simple carbs, and then came complex carbs, and it was just chicken and veggies. And then I became vegetarians, and what I ate, I'm not sure, but I ate food apparently. And then I would skip meals. Like, if I came home after practice and I didn't have dinner, it was fine. Because then my calories were low, right?
You're like, oh, I'll get skinnier, so I'm just not going to eat
this way. Yeah. Or chronic weight fluctuations is the second symptom. So you're up and down and up and down and up and down,
yeah.
which was never really me. I kind of went down, 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 and then up.
Uh-huh.
And then, I kind of evened out over the years once I got everything under control. The third thing is rigid rituals and routines surrounding food and exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it may be that you have to eat a certain amount, or you can't eat before, or, it has to be this type of food.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is something where I think, because we talk a lot about pre and post nutrition and stuff like that, and I always say, like, this is what you should do. You need to do X, Y, and Z. If you don't do it, if you miss it a day, if you don't get your protein shake in after training, it's okay.
Yeah.
Nothing bad's going to happen. And so I think that it's I have rigid rituals around my food and exercise, but if I skip them, right? Like if life happens and I don't get in my protein or my carbs or whatever, I'm like, oh, that sucks. But it doesn't produce anxiety. And I think it's the anxiety producing thing. Like, oh my gosh, everything's ruined.
Mm-hmm.
That is really dangerous.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Feelings of guilt and shame associated with eating, which I'm sure we've all felt at some point.
Yeah.
Preoccupation with food, weight, body image that negatively impacts your quality of life. So if you're weighing yourself multiple times a day, if every time you're in a mirror you're like pinching your fat, or you are always thinking about food. What am I going to eat? What am I going to eat? How much am I going to eat? I can't eat too much. I can't eat too little. Like, it's this thing.
It's constantly.
I remember for me, it was, I would give anything in the world. I would give anything to make the voices in my head stop thinking about food. Like, stop thinking about how much, when, what. Am I hungry? Am I not hungry? Oh, my stomach hurts. Oh, it doesn't hurt. Like, it occupied like 85% of my thinking space.
Which really impacts your life, because where is there room to think about anything else?
There wasn't. I couldn't focus.
That's intense.
A feeling of loss of control around food, including compulsive eating habits. So for me, I'd call it like pantry time. My husband would go to bed and I would stay up simply so I could eat without him knowing what I was eating. And I would sit in the pantry and I would just eat. Wow. Like, it would just be... I couldn't control it. Like, I'd be like, I'm not going to do it tonight, I'm not going to do it tonight, and then I'll just have a little bit. Before I knew it, I'd eaten like half of whatever it was.
Did this come out of like having been restricted on food so much? So then like your brain's like, I need food, and suddenly you become obsessed with it, and now you have to eat all of this food? Yeah. Did it come out of restriction for you, do you feel like?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And then, well, I'll get into my story in just a little bit, because I think I've like kind of mentioned my story, but I think diving into the details is important.
Yeah.
And then last is using exercise or food restriction, fasting or purging to make up for bad foods, which I did. For a while, I was like, it's fine. I'm not anorexic or bulimic. Mm-hmm. And then I started puking. And then I was like, okay, never again. And then I do it again. I'm like, okay, never again. And then I do it again. I'm like, all right, I have a problem.
Yeah.
And it was kind of scary, because I knew that this thing could stop the feelings that I had about eating whatever I ate.
Yeah.
But I also knew what that thing could do to my body.
Mm-hmm.
So it was terrifying, but I didn't know how to stop.
Yeah.
You know?
That's very disruptive to life.
Well,
absolutely.
It can ruin your throat. Like, it can
absolutely.
With all your digestive juices coming up here where they shouldn't be.
Ruin your throat and your teeth.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
As Kristin kind of mentioned, it's difficult being an athlete and struggling with eating, because we know we have to eat. I mean, everyone knows we have to eat, but specifically as athletes and strength athletes, in order to improve on what we want to improve on, we have to eat. We know generally the macros of the foods we eat, and eating can be somewhat ritualistic, like pre and post, as we said. But you know, it's what Kristin said. It's like, if I skip my pre-workout now or post-workout now, it's like, damn it, you know, I can feel it, but like, it is what it is. We're moving on with life.
Right. Not obsessing over it.
Yeah. Me a couple of years ago it would be the end of the world. Like, I would be in tears just thinking of how I completely screwed up. I might as well give up and never do anything ever again. Like, that was, it was black or white.
Yeah, that the ability to be able to put something behind you that wasn't perfect is super important. And I think when you can't do that, that's when this becomes some disordered eating. Mm-hmm. When you dwell on those...
It's the dwelling.
Then you dwell on those things that didn't go perfectly. I'm not even going to call them mistakes because they're just something that happened. It's not... I think a mistake gives it a bad connotation, and that's not... It's just something didn't go perfectly, and... Mm-hmm. You've got to move on for it, and the inability to be able to move on from it and just say, well, screw it, I'm just going to eat everything now because I already messed up.
Yeah. Well, and I can remember it was like a physical feeling in my body of, I know I shouldn't have eat whatever that was, or like I had told myself not to eat that. Yeah. And then when I did, it wasn't even that I was full. It was like this feeling of there was something foreign and nasty. I don't know how to describe the feeling. If you are listening and you're like, oh my God, I know that feeling. It's hard to describe, but you just feel like there's something wrong inside of you. And either you need to get it out or you need to fix it. Whether that means you need to work out or you need to skip dinner or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like, somehow you have to fix that feeling.
Yeah.
So it's not just people who say just eat food. You're like, okay, you can suck it, because that's not how it works.
Uh-huh.
All right. So... the thing that I found that was really difficult also as being a strength athlete is I struggled because of watching social media.
Yeah.
I would follow some really big, like, bodybuilder names who somehow were always like 10% body fat year round.
Yeah.
And I just hated myself because I didn't look like that. And then there are companies that use or endorse athletes that are lean and muscular. And they show that as something that should be attainable rather than like what they've accomplished.
Yeah, that's my biggest pet peeve is the social media, whether it's intentional or not, putting athletes' appearances above what their performance is.
Right.
Making that appear that their appearances are more important than what their performance is.
They look like an athlete.
Whatever that is.
And then they are an athlete.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I get, like, really elite athletes a lot of times to stay really competitive, maybe really ultra lean to stay in a really competitive weight class and stuff like that. I get that. But that is a very small percentage of athletes out there, and I think the majority of people that listen to this podcast don't fall into that category. If you do, like, great, we support you, but if you don't fall into that category, there's nothing wrong with you.
Right. We idolize then those that have been endorsed as athletes. So whether we want to or not, whether we love these athletes because of what they do, we can't really ignore how they look, right? And so you're scrolling through social media and you can be constantly bombarded with images of what they have deemed as what's an athletic body. We all know the type: abs, very defined muscular shoulders, and a very lean face. Like, that's how an athletic body looks. Yeah. And that's either subconsciously or consciously just destroys our self-worth.
Yeah.
We think that because, I've got a little muffin top, I've got a little belly, all of a sudden, we're not worth not even what they are, but just like we're not worth anything.
Right. Or that we suck as an athlete because we don't have abs.
We suck as a person because we don't have abs. It's not even an athlete.
Yeah, true.
So something that I did that helped me a lot when I was recovering is I just unfollowed some of these bigger individuals that had that body that I wanted, and I only followed them because I wanted to look like I wanted to have something to be aspirational to. You know what they say, get those aspirational clothing, the smaller clothes that'll fit you, and I want to be a size 4. That was kind of my thing. I want to look like this athlete. But I didn't one of the people I followed ran like 30 miles a day or something absurd.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Which is certainly not something you want to do.
No, I don't want to do it. But I mean, if it meant at that time that I could be small and look like her, I would have done it.
Oh, okay.
Without a doubt. And then I started following people that maybe don't have this athletic body, but I really could connect with them on a personal level. Whether it was rescues I started following, or it was people who just are good athletes, like Sarah Robles, I started to follow her.
Gosh, I love her.
Jenny Arthur, I started to follow her. Bama Burger, I followed her, because these are not people that, you know, that are deemed this athlete, this coined athletic look. They don't fit the box.
They intentionally don't use their body to get followers and influence people.
They use their performance or their mindset to get people.
Yes.
And I found once I did that switch, it really helped me, because I wasn't scrolling through things like, oh, okay, I am fat. Okay, I am ugly. Oh, okay. Instead, I was like, oh, I can do this. Like, she can do it. I can do it. Like, this person is uplifting. They make me feel good about where I am. Yeah. Or, you know, third option, get rid of social media altogether.
Yeah.
Throw it in the toilet. Did you know that 62% of female athletes will suffer from an eating disorder or disordered eating?
That is crazy, but based on my experiences with my athletes with Fiercely Fueled, with our Eat for Strength ladies, friends, like, I see it. Mm-hmm. I can see it. Absolutely. That is a crazy amount, though. 62%. Wow.
And I can't help but wonder if we did a better job of helping our youth figure these things out.
Absolutely. We've talked about that. Like, how do we, in our very first Eat for Strength group, I think that you and I talked about this, like, if what these women are learning in this course, if they had learned this stuff at 16 or
life would be different.
14, would they have ever gotten to this place of being so mentally messed up over food that it's hard sometimes you get to a point where there's so much misinformation and so much in all these, you get so confused by it all that then you can't even pay attention to what science is saying, right? Because you have so many emotional thoughts and beliefs surrounding food and it's just confusing. It's really confusing. And I totally agree. If young girls were taught that were in sports or not even in sports, if someone just talked to them about how do you fuel your body? What is like healthy? And I don't just mean like a clean diet. I mean balance, you know, of treats and vegetables and whatever. Mm-hmm. If this was talked about, I totally agree that would we have all these women in their 20s, 30s, and 40s and older suffering from all of this, and then like shooting themselves in the foot in the gym, training so hard, but they want to stay in a certain weight class and they're missing out on incredible strength gains because they feel constricted by this number of this weight class because they're so afraid to gain weight or whatever.
Oh yeah. And I think this is something that, you know, Smart Fit Girls, we had them on.
Yeah.
I think they're doing an incredible job of trying to augment this whole disordered eating spiral of young girls.
Yes.
I mean, not necessarily teaching them what a macro is, but teaching them, like, you're growing. You're going to get strong. Here's kind of the idea of what you need to eat, how you need to eat. And fuck it, if you want to eat a gallon of ice cream, you're 14. Yeah. Do this now, because when you get to be in your late 20s, early 30s, that shit ain't happening.
Yeah.
I just think we do such a disservice to our youth.
I agree.
And, you know, in my health class, I remember in high school, we took health class, which is supposed to be like health in general, like nutrition health, how to sexual health, like all this stuff. You know how much time we spent on nutrition? Like a day. Really? You know how much time we spent talking about how not to get an STD and how all these STDs are so terrifying? Like, most of the time.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I can get on board with that, but the nutrition is also important. But yeah, I do. I remember our health class was all about STDs.
Yeah, there's more to health than just...
Which it is important to learn about that stuff.
But I feel like it could be covered in a week. A week of grotesque images, and then let's talk about things that can be applicable to life.
Yeah, right. Like exercise, nutrition, and sleep, and all the stuff that we talked about.
But here's edible crab. I feel like we could have done a better job. Yeah. And I felt like most of that was pointed at women because it was always like, you'll get an STD and then you'll get pregnant. You'll get this and then you'll get pregnant. You're like, I get it. I can procreate. Yeah. Stop it.
Right.
Anyway.
Can I talk a little bit about the weight class thing that I just mentioned though? Because I really want to talk about this.
I'll stop talking about STDs.
Okay, yeah. I had this epiphany a while back that I see constantly, like people wanting to cut weight. They want to cut weight class because they see, you and I just talked about this, they see these numbers in this lower weight class and they're like, I can hit these numbers. I could do it. I could drop 20 pounds and I could be in that weight class and I could win everything.
True.
And if we're talking about a world championship or getting an American record or whatever your nation record is, like all this stuff, that is
different.
That's different. But if you're beginner to intermediate,
even some of the advanced,
I think that what's happening is there's this like want it now mentality versus saying, if I just eat appropriately, I'm not talking about gaining weight. I'm talking about eating appropriately and just getting strong and focusing a year on just eating right, getting strong, dialing everything in, you could stay in your weight class or even move up a weight class and probably crush it. Mm-hmm. But
that doesn't make money. You know that, right?
Yeah.
Cutting makes money.
Yeah.
Bulking makes money because cutting makes money. And then bulking makes money because cutting makes money.
Don't get me started.
It's this horrible cycle.
But I think that a lot of female strength athletes are unaware of how much strength they could actually put on in a solid year if they just dialed in their nutrition and ate enough. Like, I'm talking about maintaining your current body weight. I'm not talking about a bulk, which is totally different. I'm talking about your body composition is probably going to change, but staying where you're at and just eating and training and having the confidence and belief in yourself to know that you can be competitive in your weight class if you just put in the work. And I think that this like constant like cutting culture and wanting to be in a lower weight class and all this, I did it to myself. I decided I needed to, I had dropped some body weight because I had too much body fat. I was in an unhealthy body fat category. I dropped some body fat and then ended up, this is when weightlifting, the weight classes were 69 and 63. And so I fell naturally at about 65 kilos is kind of where I ended up and was comfortable there. And I thought, well, shit. 65 kilos, let's go to 63 because look at what those 63 girls are lifting. I can crush them.
Yeah. And then?
And do you know what happened? I just read, I think, an Instagram post from a long time ago that I made about this. In the first year of my just only focusing on weightlifting, because I came into weightlifting from CrossFit, I only put 11 kilos on my total. Because I was cutting weight the entire time. 11 kilos my first year. I should have had massive beginner gains. Yeah. I put 11 kilos on my total. That is pathetic. Mm-hmm. That is, and you saw me, you knew me then. I worked my ass off day in and day out. I had everything dialed in, but I was in a caloric deficit. Mm-hmm. And so instead of putting on what maybe I could have put 25 kilos on my total and stayed at 69, I put 11 kilos on my total and stayed at 60 and lifted as a 63. Mm-hmm. And I will never do that again.
No, there's no point.
It's stupid.
Well, but coming from like my perspective, I remember when I first started dieting, I was 16, 15, and I had never had a positive affirmation about like my body. I would only ever had negative based on how I looked or what I've heard other people say or what my family said. And when I started running like a crazy person and cutting calories without knowing what I was doing, the first positive affirmation I had was all of a sudden boys were interested in me. And then I just, in my brain, I made that connection at 15. I said, my value is I only have value when I'm small. Yeah. I didn't have value when I'm big. Or I wasn't even that big. I remember this other girl too, bless her heart, she didn't know what she was saying. I remember talking about my weight to her. And she was like, yeah, I don't think anyone needs to weigh over 130. And I was like, I weigh 140. She goes, no way. And I was like, oh my God, is that too big? Oh my gosh. And it was so, I'm sitting right now at 145 and I'm like the happiest, the healthiest, except for my hip, that I've ever been. Yeah. And I feel my value. But back then, man, nothing, my performance didn't matter, my strength didn't matter, because I didn't know these things. The only value I had was that all of a sudden boys were noticing me. That was my positive affirmation. Right. And that carried me on until I was 24.
Well, and I've said that numerous times. I think that our culture places way too much emphasis on what we look like. Yep. Way too much emphasis on appearance, and fitting a certain mold. And I think that is a really challenging thing, especially to learn that at such a young age. Like when you know how you were treated before. Yeah. And then ignored. And then you see how you're treated when you lose a little bit of weight and you think, oh, well that's it. I must have to be small.
Yeah. That's the only way I'm going to have value in this world is if I'm small.
Yeah.
And that fucked me up, fam. Fucked me up for a long time.
Right.
So what do you do if you are experiencing eating disorder or disordered eating symptoms? First and foremost, if you are in an eating disorder, or if you have an eating disorder, full-on bulimia, anorexia, exercise bulimia, no nutrition coach can fix you.
Right.
You need treatment. Talk to your doctor, talk to your mom, talk to your dad, talk to your friend. You need to get healthy, and no macro coach is going to get you there. No. I have seen girls on Instagram who very much had one of the three. They never talked about it, but it was apparent. They were very small. And you would see them like, I'm working with this coach. And you're like, fuck. Because it would be a coach that was like a clean eating coach, a bodybuilding coach.
Someone who's just furthering this
disorder.
They're
just digging them in the hole further. And, you know, when you're in that state, you are just reaching for someone to grab your hand and pull you into something. Right. And unfortunately, they get pulled into this shit all the time. Right. So if you are suffering from eating disorder,
like straight up eating disorder,
you have to have help. You have to find a facility that will help you. Yep. That's just how it is. But if you're having symptoms of disordered eating, you're kind of in this gray area and you're not really sure what to do. So let me tell you my full story. You ready for story time? All right. So, as I alluded to, my story started when I was about 15. I started going to, well, first of all, I was like a tri-sport athlete. So I was always doing something every season, no matter what. But then I quit basketball. I didn't really like the people. I think in hindsight, I should have done it. But anyway, I didn't want to be part of that group anymore, so I just quit basketball. So that took a whole season of me being active, and I was mostly sedentary. I mean, I'd go home and hang out with people, and then I was mostly just be sitting on the couch, right? Like, I wasn't being active in my time. So I put on some weight, which for a 16-year-old is no big deal. But for me, or a 15-year-old, it was a big deal. So I started going to the gym with my friend, and we would just walk and then leave, like walk half a mile, maybe. And then I started taking it to another level. Okay. So then I thought, well, okay, I can do half a mile. Can I do a mile? I couldn't do a mile. So I worked myself up to a mile, and I started running a mile and 2 miles, 3 miles, and I get up to 6 miles. Okay. And then after 6 miles, I started doing sprints. So I would jog a quarter mile, sprint a quarter mile, jog a quarter mile, sprint a quarter mile for 6 miles.
Wow.
And then on top of that, I'd get on the stair stepper for 30 minutes. And then I'd get on the elliptical for 30 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
So it was this whole thing. It just spiraled out of control over the years. So during that time, I didn't really modulate my food that much because the exercise was doing it alone.
Yeah.
But once I like kind of plateaued in my weight loss, I then learned what a calorie was and how to, you know, if you reduce calories, then you'll lose weight. So I started tracking my calories. And like, I think I've said on this before, I got to a point that I was eating 900 calories a day.
Wow.
So anyway, I was all fucked up. And then we went on some class trip and we ate like normal people ate. And I ended up eating more than I would in a day, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You ate more than 900 calories?
I ate more than 900 calories. And my body was like, oh my God, thank God. And then I started binging. So I would restrict and then binge and restrict and then binge. I went away to college and I got really deep into it. Like it was really unhealthy. It was so bad. But it wasn't a full-on eating disorder because I wasn't losing weight. I was actually gaining weight because I was restricting and then binging so much
bad. That you're in a caloric surplus,
you know,
as opposed to being in a deficit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know those big bags of M&Ms?
Yeah.
I would get those and eat it in a day.
Okay.
That would be my binge. And then, bless her heart, Kayla, who I lived with, I would eat some of her food and I feel guilty because when you're in a binge, if you know this, like you don't control anything. Nothing is controlled.
Yeah. You're like, I don't care that that's so-and-so's food. I'm going to eat it.
It's not even that. You're like, I don't think that they'd mind. I mean, I'll replace it. Or like, I haven't seen them eat it, so it's okay. And like, I really need it right now. It's like this compulsive behavior where you feel horrible, but you can't stop.
Mm-hmm.
So I went away to college. I couldn't control it. And then I decided to transfer back home, which in hindsight was probably like the best thing for me because I was back in like a very controlled environment. I had my parents there and I was right back on the trail, but I started to recognize that maybe this wasn't super healthy. And so then I started to try to fix it. I learned about reverse dieting. I learned about increasing calories and I tried to do that, but it was never regimented enough. And I was still so focused on being small that it wasn't until I actually came to my grad school. So when I came here and I met you and I met and I started recognizing there are these really strong women that I thought, okay, I need to fix this. I don't know how to fix this, but I need to fix this. So during this time, I was still binging. I was still restricting because I didn't know how to fix what I was going through, but I didn't want to let it get out of control. So the only way I knew how to do that was to restrict, which led to binging. Because
you thought, if I work to get out of this, I'm going to gain weight. And that is absolutely what I don't want to happen. And so how can I fix this? But I don't want my weight to go up. It's basically where you were at, right?
That's exactly where I was at. And hindsight, my weight went up. And that's when I developed my purging behavior. So I would binge. And then the only way I could relieve any of the guilt or the pressure I would feel in my stomach or just in my mind would be to purge. Okay. So I had like a toothbrush, we all know that. Boom. I could purge. And so then it became a restrict, binge, purge cycle. And I would just be crying because like I knew I shouldn't be doing this. I knew it was unhealthy. I knew it was bad for me, but I still did it because
didn't know how to stop.
I didn't know how to stop. And finally, I don't know what it was. I had tried a coach to help me reverse. This is why counting macros for people trying to come out of disordered eating is horrible. Even if the macros are good intentions. Like I hired this coach to try to reverse me out of this so I could like get my food up because I know I needed to get my food up. Like I know I needed to get what I ate to here and I was here. But I was like here, but I felt like I was here, but it needed to be a constant middle ground. And he had the best intentions. Like he was trying to reverse me. We started being really low because it's what I told him I was eating, which wasn't really the case because
what you thought you were eating on a daily basis or even if we look at it over the course of a week, you thought you were maybe eating 900 calories a day, but really when you average it all out, it was way more than that, right?
I was probably eating like 3,000 calories a day on average.
Mm-hmm. But in your mind, you weren't. So when you tell him I'm eating this many calories, it was not accurate.
Right. And so I couldn't, I was so hungry. I couldn't stick to anything. And so like hindsight, he had his best intentions. I think he's a great coach. I'm not going to say who it was, but I personally could not stick to the macros because I was out of control. Right. There was no control. I could not count macros.
Right. Well, I remember I worked with you because you had, I know of another coach that you had, and I think you were cutting. And then I started working with you. And then
I was a mess.
And that was, you were, I think that's when you finally told me, you were like, so this is what I do. Like,
yeah,
I try to stick to my macros, but then I don't. And then I go wait, and then I binge, and you were having I remember that being a lot of trouble for you.
And no other resource I found besides like was macro counting. Like the only resource I knew was that people who counted macros were in control of their food.
Right.
I wanted to be in control.
Right. That's what I remember we had this conversation and you were like, I think I need to not count macros. And I was like, yes, I'm with you. Like if that feels like an unhealthy behavior, I fully support that. You intuitively, most people, a lot of people kind of know like, this is kind of an unhealthy behavior for me. And then absolutely, like as soon as I hear that, we're not counting macros.
Right.
Because it can become obsessive.
Well, it was obsessive. And then it would always turn into like, all those macro friendly foods that are like high volume, but like
vegetables?
Everything. No, I mean like those protein treats or like, like high like the things that you see all the people make.
Right.
I
don't eat food that is made like that.
Right. But I did.
For that reason. Yeah.
I did. And my whole diet would turn into just eating volume foods and trying to like save my macros for the end of the day. And like, then I would binge at the end of the day because I was so hungry from starving myself
just
all
didn't
day.
Eat all day. You just didn't a lot for enough food throughout the day. Sure.
Exactly.
Sure.
So when I finally, I worked with like, including you, I think I worked with 5 coaches and it was not the coach's fault. Every coach I worked with was great. They knew their shit. They knew macros.
Right.
It was me. I was the problem.
Right.
Not saying like bad Mary, but like I was not in the place I could.
It was your behaviors were not set up to be in that environment. Yeah.
Yeah. So I took a different route. I said, okay, well, macro counting doesn't work. In fact, any food behavior doesn't work. I'm at the highest weight I've ever been my entire life. I'm so uncomfortable in my body. What have I not done? And the only thing I had not done was do nothing.
Yeah.
So I stopped. I stopped weighing myself, which was huge. Like that was the scariest thing. I talk to women all the time and say, well, I try not to weigh myself, but like it's a compulsion. Like you feel like you need to because then you're in control of that, right?
Right.
You're in control of your weight.
Right.
But for me, it was like, okay, I cannot step on the scale. I put the scale away. I cannot weigh, measure, track, nothing. I just need to
eat.
I just need to learn to listen to my body. And I still had episodes of restriction and binging and purging. And it was slowly, gradually over time, I learned to listen. Like, what does my body want to eat? How much do I want to eat? What's full? What's hungry? It took me a year and a half to really learn.
Well, and I can imagine because those are signals that you had suppressed for so long.
Yeah, I was either always hungry or very full.
Right.
And so the middle grounds, which I talk about with our Eat for Strength ladies of intuitive eating, there's a middle ground you kind of want to stay in where you recognize you're getting hungry. That's when you need to eat. And then recognize when you're satisfied or kind of full, but not like so sickly full.
Not like Thanksgiving full?
Not like I would get worse than Thanksgiving full.
No.
It would be bad. Anyone who's binged, you guys know this. But yeah, it wasn't until I relinquished control and just kind of let my body do what it needed to do. And it was terrifying. I can't tell you that this was a happy, fun experience. And I was like, wow, listen, I can listen to my whole body. This is great. I still cried every day. I still hated how I looked. I stopped looking at myself in the mirror. It sucked. But once I got to the point where one day I was sitting and I was thinking about something, and I had been thinking about whatever it was for an hour or two, like it was a problem I was focusing on, I recognized I hadn't thought about food all day. And it was that moment I was like, holy shit, I can be free.
Yeah.
And I still had bouts of like thinking about food too much, but then I recognized, man, if I can just suppress it, be like, okay, food, you can be in my brain, but you can only be here for a few minutes and then you got to get out.
Yeah.
Once I learned how to suppress those feelings, not like suppress in a bad way, but like, okay, go away.
Just put them out of your mind.
Just put them out of my mind. I was able to regain control. I can now count macros. Like, I still need a little break. Like, I think when I count macros, I give myself a day that I don't track. And that's so mentally amazing for me. I know it's not great as a nutrition coach because you have a day of unknowns. But for me, if I don't do it, I will binge the next week.
Yeah. Well, but no plan is worth your mental health or your health. There is no nutrition plan that is worth that, or no nutritional goal that is worth that. That if you have to sacrifice your health or your mental health to try to hit your goals, what's the point? Yeah.
And then I'll tell you, after I got control, after I had been eating intuitively for a while, I stepped on the scale and I was surprised. I was lighter than what I was before. My body found an equilibrium because I wasn't overfeeding it. And then, just to give anyone listening hope, I did cut. Like, I was able to cut. I did it intuitively, so I didn't use macros at this point, but I cut without it being a thing. It wasn't something that I was obsessing over or was... Kristin didn't even know I was cutting.
Well, I knew because you were getting smaller.
That was it.
Yeah.
Like, I had no
idea
you
hadn't talked about it at all.
Because I recognized every time I was like, I'm going to go on a cut. It never happened. So I said, how about you just keep this one to yourself and see if you can do it? And then I did it. So, you know, I'm now comfortable in my body and I have control of my food, which was, you know, a year and a half ago, I was uncomfortable in my body, but had control of my food.
Right.
So it's a long process.
Right.
And that's really hard to tell someone who is struggling with it.
That it's a long process.
That it's a long process.
Yep.
So I created a list of tips.
Okay.
That I think will be very helpful for anyone who's going through this. And as always, you can reach out to me. I have been telling Kristin this, and I think I'm going to just bite the bullet. I would love to be a nutrition coach for people who are suffering from disordered eating. Is I think that it's super important, and it requires a different skill set than macro counting.
Absolutely. I don't tend to work with people with disordered eating, or they've recovered from disordered eating and will tell me like, hey, I have a history of this. It hasn't been an issue. I just want you to know. And then I'm like on the lookout for any issues. And obviously it has to be a lot of honesty between
which is
athlete
difficult.
And a coach then.
So I can tell you as an athlete, when I was having my binge disorders, I definitely lied on check-ins all the time. I had a great week, except I binged twice this week. It was a perfect week because I just couldn't let myself down.
Right.
And I couldn't let this
And you
coach
feel like
down.
you're letting the coach down. Can I just say from a nutrition coach standpoint,
of course,
that you're never letting us down. Like for any of you, you're not. It's everyone's at a different place, and everyone is going to have awesome, successful weeks, and everyone's going to have a shitty week. Like that's just how it goes. And there are some people that this is real. I think I've said this before. There are some people that this is super easy for, and they just tend to like have an awesome week all the time. And then there are people where it sounds like they're having an awesome week all the time, and they tell me they're having an awesome week all the time. But then I look at things and I'm like, I think that I'm maybe missing a little something here, because with the things that you're telling me, you kind of know like something's not quite right. And that can be really a sensitive issue. But yeah, definitely. It's if you have a shitty week with your nutrition, like it's okay. If you've hired a coach, they're there to help you with that. Just the same as if you have a weightlifting coach or a powerlifting coach and you had a shitty week in the gym, like you're probably going to tell them and not be ashamed of it. So why are we going to be ashamed of like, I made bad food choices? Like, that's so hard to say.
Yeah.
It's never disappointing to hear. It's like, oh man, I'm sorry. Like, that sucks. I'm sorry that you're going through that, but let's figure this out because it's okay. We're going to put it behind us. We're going to move on.
And if your coach doesn't say that, get a new one, because you don't need a coach sitting here telling you that you're a worthless human for messing up. Because as Kristin said, everyone's journey is completely different. And if they are nothing but supportive and problem solving to help you got to get out, because you're not going to get better having someone tell you that you're worthless.
Right.
Okay. First things first. Tips. Stop counting, stop tracking, stop everything, and stop trying to fit yourself into something you think you should be. So, like I said, I stopped everything. I just ate. It was hard. It was difficult. I cried. It was not easy. But knowing where I am now, oh my God, it is so worth it. It's so worth it.
Good.
Tell a trusted friend, you are already suffering. You do not need to suffer alone. Tell someone who, I think I told my mom, and then I kind of told my husband, and then I told Kristin. And then at that moment I was like, okay, I feel like I can kind of get this together. Like I have an ally.
Well, and that reduces some of the shame around it. Just talking about things like this reduces the shame. And it's the shame, it's the secrets that make it worse, right?
Yeah.
Because it just makes everything worse when you feel like, I can't tell anyone I'm doing this, and I'm trying to hide it all. And then it just spirals out of control. But the minute you can start to talk about it, it reduces that shame. And it's like, oh, I told these people and the world didn't end.
Yeah, they still love me.
They still love me.
It's fine.
And they support me. And like, maybe I can do this.
Look for support groups in your area.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're on a college campus, they always have some type of eating disorder or disordered eating. Usually they call it an eating disorder support group, but still, same thing. Right. Go talk to them, talk to people.
And there's no shame in getting help or talking. I think that might be like a big barrier for people to like, if I go to a support group, then that means this is real. Like this is true. And I have to accept that this is going on. And I don't want to accept that this is going on, or I don't want that to be me.
Right. Well,
I think there's been a lot of things in my life where I'm like, I don't want to go seek help because that means that this is actually real.
Oh, exactly.
But when you can step past that and accept, like, this is happening, and if I truly want to get better, I need help.
Mm-hmm. And that's something I wish I had done. I put it on the tips because it's something I think that really would have helped me if I would have just accepted, been like, hey, I need help. And this is difficult, and so what? So what if this means I have an eating disorder? Like, I don't want to live my whole life like this.
Yeah.
It's okay to admit that there's something you need to fix.
Absolutely.
We do it all the time with training techniques and sometimes our nutrition.
Yep.
Just because your eating behavior is not normal doesn't mean that like you don't deserve help.
Right. Or that you're bad.
Yeah, you're not bad.
Mm-hmm. Or unworthy.
Yeah. The final thing is just be so patient with yourself. You cannot spend any second thinking about something that may have been bad. So if you, or quote unquote bad, if you had a binge the day before, it's over. Forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
The next day, you're not restricting. You've forgotten about it. You have to move on. You have to get back to some type of regularity, and you have to tell yourself, you have to look in the mirror and say, Mary or so-and-so, it's fine. Like, you fucked up, but you know what? Tomorrow you won't. Or tomorrow it'll be better. Or whatever. You're not going to be perfect. You're not going to be able to post full day of eatings on YouTube and have these people look up to you and whatever while you're recovering. But man, it is so worth it. And then you have that patience with yourself. Now that I'm out of it, even some of the dumb shit that I do for like the podcast or just in my personal life, I'm like, whoops. Okay, well, let's fix it. Instead of like, oh my God, Mary, you're so stupid. It's like, all right, okay, so we did something bad. Let's fix it.
Well, it's letting go of, it's accepting imperfection and
Yeah.
letting go of the fear of being imperfect or perfectionism.
Yeah.
Really, like letting that go and say, you know what? Things aren't going to be perfect all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and I think one thing that I've said to people in the past that I know it was a really helpful concept for me just in dealing with other things in my life is that like every day you wake up is a day that you get to choose your focus, or you get to choose. It's a new day. Like you restart, everything starts over today. So if you quote unquote made a mistake yesterday, well, today's a new day.
Yeah. You don't have to make that mistake.
Like,
and
exactly.
The person yesterday has no control over the person today.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of that is like learning to live in the present moment.
Yeah.
And that is where, for me, in different things in my life, where meditation has been really helpful for me, like doing guided meditations or just even like cleaning my house, things that really bring me into the present moment. Training really brings me into the present moment. And I don't think about those things that I potentially screwed up or whatever. And it allows me to practice just being present. And I think that for people that are suffering from eating disorder or disordered eating would be so helpful, just to focus on the here and now, like literally this second.
Yeah. Not tomorrow, not yesterday, but what is going on right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's that. Know if you suffer, you're not suffering alone. And if anything, if you need to tell someone, you can always reach out to us or me or Kristin or whomever. I will never judge anyone who reaches out to me. We all suffer, and you shouldn't suffer alone.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Suffering alone is
A bum
awful.
diggity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Share it. I'm all for sharing.
Unless it's germs or the flu.
Keep your germs. You can
You
share
nasty.
everything else.
All right. I think that's it for this episode.
Yeah. So if you have questions or concerns, you can reach us at empoweredbyiron@gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram at empoweredbyiron, on Facebook at empoweredbyiron, and our Facebook group page, Feminine Strength Athlete Resource.
Yep. And until then, until next time.